Hello, this is Dr. Mark DeBrinkett, the Good News Doctor. And today I have a very exciting episode for us. This is our first episode on CBD products and what they do to our nervous system and why we want to use them. So today's guest is James Comerford. He is the CEO of a company called Path of Purity. I have recently done a research study for them about a year ago, and that's how I got turned on to this amazing product. And so today's guest is going to help us understand the 101 basics of cannabinoids and CBD products and why this would be a good thing for all of us. So welcome, James Comerford. Welcome, James. I'm happy to have you here with us today. Go ahead and tell my listeners a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mark. It's delightful to be here. I'm going to give you a little bit of a context as a beginning. I'm 66 years old. I have a resting heart rate of 50. In 2021, I worked out 349 days, and I'm on about the same pace for this year, even though I had a cold or flu that kind of knocked me on my backside for a little bit. The only reason I'm sharing that, and the only thing that makes that really interesting, I think, is the fact that when I was 40 years old, in 1996, I was in a wheelchair with Guillain-Barré syndrome, and doctors literally never thought I would get back even a part of the function that I've been, fortunate enough to regain. Many people that I have met over the last number of years, and I work in what I call the healing field, many of them got started in the healing field as a result of something that happened to them or a family member. And I kind of count myself among that group. And that Guillain-Barré put me on a very different path than I would have been on otherwise. And it actually put me in what I call the field of cellular health. And what I mean by that is I have spent the last number of years assembling technologies and tools pretty much on a law of attraction basis. And every one of those tools give cells back the power, oxygen, or other resources to heal, perform, and repair, or they return the body to homeostasis and musculoskeletal balance. So I was about 14 years into this, or, there, give or take, and I had sold a high-powered PEMF machine to a herbalist friend of mine in New York. And one day he said to me, "Hey, you got all these other tools you're working with. You should work with our CBD." And I don't know if I had the face to admit the fact I didn't know what a CBD was, or whether I covered it up and kind of went on and said, sure, sure. But in any case, I had the need at that point in time to go find out what a CBD was. And when I did, it was kind of a combination of, kind of fascination, at some level, probably being a little bit annoyed that I'd never heard about some of the things related to CBD before. And, but more than anything else, just being elated to have learned about CBD and the effect it has on the body. So the most interesting part of that for me was I learned about something called the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system is, of course, our body's most powerful neurotransmitter system, with basically responsibility or function around things like mood and cognition, memory control, memory coordination, pain, immune response, temperature, and several other things. And I also learned these wonderful receptors in every interesting or important part of the body. And it's not that there's parts of the body that aren't, but it was things like the brain, the heart, and so forth, and the various systems. And it was literally a bridge between mind and body. And then all of a sudden, I kind of learned about this thing called CBD and why all of a sudden these were becoming popular and very well known and people interested in them was because of what CBD actually does with the endocannabinoid system. So that's kind of a context of what put me here today. And I'll let you jump back in because I've been talking a long time, and I want to turn it back to you, and we just kind of move forward a bit.
So as we talk about this endocannabinoid system and how it relates to our actual nervous system, That's what I think people just don't really see the connection. I can totally appreciate having the condition you were in, being wheelchair bound like I once was as well. And to have your nervous system come back to life again and things start to come back online and systems start to work again and hormones and enzymes and receptors just start coming back to life again. It doesn't just happen by default, right? So we have to either have substances that we're ingesting, in our food, to get into the molecular place that then can actually be absorbed and utilized as building blocks. But the cannabinoid system, is it more like the workers in the nervous system? It's more like the janitor's key, or it's the key card that allows access into this system or into this building or into this room, and it lights up the lights into this office and it turns this on and that on. And so, what's a good analogy for how this is different than just eating food to be healthy or to reduce inflammation? We're actually doing things that are directly tying to the nervous system to get it to, we call homeostasis, return or thrive towards homeostasis. And how do these cannabinoids have any type of relationship with that?
Great question. And you're bringing me back to my favorite part about the endocannabinoid system. I was absolutely fascinated, as I said, when I started to learn about the endocannabinoid system. And the reason I said I was a bit annoyed is that, having had Guillain-Barré and a whole host of other things that affect most of us over the years, no doctor had ever mentioned, or nobody had ever mentioned to me about this thing called the endocannabinoid system. So that was part A. And when I looked at the fact that, Guillain-Barré is an autoimmune disease that leads to neurological degenerative function, if you will, or loss of function, the fact that we have the most powerful neurotransmitter system in our body, something that clearly would be a big factor in a Guillain-Barré situation, and as we'll talk about in a moment, many others. It just flat out annoyed me that nobody had ever either known about it or thought to tell me about it. And so I'm somebody who likes analogies or metaphors, and I sometimes confuse the two. So whichever one this is, and somebody will be saying, hey, you said analogy and it's a metaphor, or vice versa. Um, what occurred to me is, first of all, the endocannabinoid system is literally a bridge between mind and body. Because if you think about where all the receptors are, if from the brain through all of the other organs, it literally bridges between the two things, and it gets over into a whole lot of different conditions, and you start talking about mood, etc. But I think of the endocannabinoid system in its strongest way as the conductor of an orchestra, because our body is made up of a bunch of, you know, what is it, 37 trillion cells, you know, number of organs and all those things. And what the endocannabinoid system actually does, it gets different types or parts of the body's different types of cells to actually work together to produce the best result for the body. And it's a lot like the conductor of an orchestra using a baton to cause different, groups to kind of harmonize and produce that wonderful sound. The endocannabinoid system uses what are called endocannabinoids, which it produces itself, to basically unlock receptors that are all over the body, much like you put a key in a lock to unlock it. And what research has determined over the years, and I have to be very careful the way I say this, because we're in a world where you're not necessarily supposed to say anything that sounds remotely like a claim. But essentially what you're looking at is, by adding cannabinoids, which come from, the cannabis plant, if you will, what you can do is actually bolster what is happening in your endocannabinoid system. And what research suggests is that by adding cannabinoids to the endocannabinoids that our body is already producing, you actually increase the efficiency of the endocannabinoid system. You increase the baseline activity of the endocannabinoid system, and you actually cause it to grow more receptors. So when I read that and heard that, I got really excited because that's like somebody saying you can do something to make your heart better, your brain better, your liver better, and all of those things. If, of course, you're able to find something that works the way, in the best way that your body works. And of course, it passes all the standards and things that a product should have before we would want to consume it. But I got really excited about it when I heard about it, not only for myself, but for a whole lot of other people that I've, been privileged to work with over the last number of years, from many levels of health and many walks of life.
So what you're saying is our body has this cannabinoid system that works within our nervous system to help regulate receptors, turning things on and off throughout our entire nervous system. And the actually has the ability to produce its own cannabinoids to be the locks to these keys to turn things on and off. But now we found in the cannabis plant, which it has so many healing properties, that we can take the cannabinoids out of this plant and then figure out a way to deliver it to the system to work with our own cannabinoids to, in essence, give it more keys, more ability, more energy, more fluidity, more what? Some people use CBD products like a CBN for sleep or a CBV for appetite and for hunger. I know that some of the cannabinoids are used for depression and for mood stuff, other ones for digestion. But really, what would make sense is to try to get back to what our body does for itself, which I would imagine would be like a full spectrum or all of the cannabinoids, and then it can use which of them it wants to do. So maybe talk for a moment the difference between a full spectrum product versus an isolate product that so many people might compare to and think, oh, I've tried CBD. I did X, Y, or Z product, but it wasn't really the same. Okay. We know that not all products are the same, and people will all respond differently to products, especially in this world. But speak to a little bit about the importance of a full spectrum and what that means to our nervous system.
Well, you're putting me right back. Like literally, when I went to learn about this, I went under a tarp for 6 weeks and started learning about all these things. And the names were so confusing, and the acronyms all sounded the same. It started with the endocannabinoid system, but then it went into, okay, if now that we know what the endocannabinoid system is, then how do you go about best influencing or impacting the endocannabinoid system? And so in that process, I went through a lot of different research and read a lot of different things. But what came out as the standard regulation, or what got said most often, was that your best choice was to go with what is called a full spectrum extract. And what we mean by that is that there are, I'm going to say it's 110 plus cannabinoids or compounds, if you will, that are inside, the cannabis plant. And some people have measured that as many more than that 110, but I'm just going to stay there. But basically what happens is when you take a full spectrum extract, you end up with the synergy of each one working together in unison, and you end up with a case where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts as a result of the uh, compounds working together. And that is what is called a full spectrum. And they work in an entourage effect. So you get that kind of cascade, if you will, of the benefits through full spectrum extract. And so that was one of the things that, I learned early on. And in fact, the product that I ended up working with is full spectrum. And so that kind of matched what I had heard and or read. The other part of that is just to go back to the endocannabinoid system. I mean, think of it as your, you know, as kind of the referee of your body or the protector of your body. We're all under incredible stress these days. And so basically the endocannabinoid system, and it uses endocannabinoids, the ones that it creates, and fires those around in response to different challenges, different stresses that occur to keep us in homeostasis or as close to that, or help us return and promote homeostasis. So it's a case of having this system say, hey, we've been through a really rough day today. We better go over and help out. And then putting, these endocannabinoids over wherever they're needed in response. And then, as you were just kind of summarizing my earlier point, having the access or opportunity to put external or cannabinoids in there to go with the endocannabinoids, which is again been seen as actually bolstering the activity and efforts and efficiency of the endocannabinoid system. So that's where those go together. An isolate is a situation or a product in which it is only, and this is where you get into the acronyms. The acronym CBD actually stands for cannabidiol, but it can also be used to reference or represent a number of different what are called CBD products, and they can have different ranges of things in them and still be called CBDs. So an isolate is an extract where essentially it's cannabidiol used in isolation to treat or used in a certain application. And there was a time some years ago where isolates were actually tested and used in certain studies to see what the effects of those were. And they work differently than the way that the full spectrum does with the entourage effect, because you don't have all the other compounds in there to actually, actualize that entourage effect, if you will.
So here's a question. You mentioned earlier that our cannabinoid system has the ability to produce cannabinoids. Does it produce the full spectrum, or are there any that we're not getting inherently inside of us that we need to look for from outside?
Well, again, what it produces internally are, and again, I don't want to, get into semantics here, but it produces the endocannabinoids. Those are, endo meaning they're produced inside us. And those are produced in by different, from the system to actually unlock different receptors. So you would get a mixture of different types of endocannabinoids throughout the body as part of that response, where our body is sending endocannabinoids over with the, certain ones are going to unlock certain keys or act as certain keys in unlocking certain locks. With the full spectrum extract, you're kind of putting in everything from the cannabis plant in that one, extract to act in that entourage effect. So you're basically putting in there, all of the different cannabinoids that are available through the plant.
Are they considered exocannabinoids because they're coming from outside in?
Yes. So it's endo
versus endo, which what our body makes for itself?
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, that's fascinating. And then also, has there been much research on the older we get, the less of these cannabinoids we're actually producing?
Great question. I haven't actually seen anything, at least in the research I did, that specifically said that one way or the other. But I, if I was to say logically, based on the way every other part of our body works, I would expect that as we age and as we, experience more stress, more wear and tear, more all of the things that happen over time, and our body doesn't function quite as well as it did before in most cases, there would be an expectation that the older we get, the more help our endocannabinoid system might require as just part of that natural aging process.
Sure. So, as I've mentioned to my viewers on other episodes, that when I first moved out to Colorado, I was super excited about this new frontier of checking out CBD products and seeing what it does to the brain. And, the first 30 companies was not looking good. And so I can definitely say that not all products are the same, especially in this industry. There seems to be a lot of competition, a lot of hype and advertising on a lot of different strands and different CBD products. And when I put it to the test, most of them I would never want to even put into my body, seeing how it just does things to the brain that are not towards homeostasis. And so, I would guess, now that I've learned more, that they were probably some of the cheaper made products, where, it's not all about high quality, like I've found a handful of companies in the last 5 years that have tested off the charts, yours being one of them. And with the path of purity, the thing that really intrigued me was when you came to me to do a study, you already had a study with the blood, and the blood was showing high levels of these cannabinoids at the 30 minutes, at the 3 hours, 6 hours, and then at 10 hours. And so you were able to come up with a slow dissolved tablet under the tongue that actually can help facilitate in your blood a full spectrum cannabinoid throughout the entire day. Where most products that we test, within that 30 minutes, you've hit the peak, and then it's just a slow decline until it's just not having an effect anymore, which is typically maybe 3 hours. And so we've seen some pretty cool products that did test off the charts that were really good for certain situations. But as far as the full spectrum one, I was super intrigued by yours. So we mimicked that study with the brain, and we did it 30 minutes. We did it at 3 hours, at 6 hours, and at 10 hours. And we found in most of the networks that we were looking at throughout the brain, major change was within 30 minutes, sustained, and then again peaked at 6 hours, and then at 10 hours, they were either still holding or returned back to their original state before the product was consumed in the first place. So this is a product that has become, a standard amongst us as well now too, just because I don't feel like I have to have something that I'm chasing all day long and trying to remember, oh, I'm feeling a little tired, I better take another dose. And, we do have those for those situations, but, I really look at yours as more of the multivitamin. It's like, this is the thing that's going to cover my whole day. And then if I'm having some issues, I might, go for one of those more problematic or focused response products, to get me through that time. But, I love that what we've seen, and, we can show a few of the slides here that I'll have Danny pull up, that we can show, some of the changes we've seen with just the cortex alone over the 30 minutes, again, 3, 6 hours, and 10 hours. And then we had executive function was another big one. And finally, we really saw some changes in that addictive reward network. And so this is just kind of keeping that nervous system more relaxed and calm throughout the whole day, so you don't always feel like you need something or need to do something or feel like you're just, running a little wild or like whatever, anxious and restless all day long, putting out one fire after another, like so many of us live our lives. And so I love the fact that we found a product that we know has the consistency and, to always deliver the same response. Now, again, I will say just CBDs in general, some people are going to respond, differently, because you're going to use these cannabinoids to open up different doors inside, to open up different channels that other people already have open. So they might not need those channels open. So again, I like that analogy of like the janitor key ring, where I have the key to every door in the building. And so the cannabinoid system's giving your nervous system access to everything, and the more we have that access, the easier we find our life being, as far as our nervous system responding as it's supposed to respond to any given situation. We're not saying you're supposed to be happy all the time and you're not supposed to be sad ever. There's a time and a place to be exactly where you're supposed to be. But the better we learn how to hack into our nervous system and then feed it the molecules, the nutrients, the technology, whatever it is that we have that can enhance that nervous system, this is where we find true healing. And this is where we find optimal health. You know, it takes a lot more to get somebody healthy than it does to maintain that health. And I just really love that I found some amazing CBD products that I can put my name behind and know that when people consume this product, they're going to actually have an amazing experience. And so it took quite a while to find you and to find the products that fit that MO, let's just say. And I really appreciate Path of Purity for doing exactly that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the story of how Path of Purity got created is kind of charming, and I won't go into the depth of it here, but suffice it to say, it was created by a group of people who'd done quite well in other aspects of life, wanted to give back, and decided that the CBD industry was a great place to have that kind of impact. So they set out and they literally, from the ground up, got the best type of products that they could get, as the raw materials, if you will. And then they were, there were some wonderful things added in, everything basically added therapeutic value when things were in balance to cut down on inflammation, et cetera, in terms of omega-3, 6, and 9. But they really were looking for something different, and they thought the difference would be in the delivery of it. It's a 50 milligram tablet that releases 25 milligrams in the first 30 minutes, followed by the second 25 milligrams 3 to 6 hours later, when your body indicates or signals the need for more. And I'm all about products on a personal level that tap into the body's own ability to perform, heal, and repair, or heal, repair, and perform, depending on who you're speaking to. But it's all about those types of things. And everything I work with makes a unique and incremental contribution to cellular health or musculoskeletal balance and homeostasis. So I was looking for something very particular for me. And the moment I started taking Path of Purity, it was one of those things where I didn't really know what to expect. But what I did discover was I was getting more done in the day without it seeming quite as troublesome or, what have you. But there were a couple of things that just really impressed me immediately. I've done a lot of exercise in my life, and I had some wear and tear injury in my right shoulder from just kind of lifting free weights overhead. And it solved a clicking in that area almost immediately after taking this. But my favorite was I used like when I run in the winter, I'd end up with my shins being itchy, and I always thought it had to do with dry skin. And then one day I Googled how guys my age had microcirculation issues that usually show up in the shins. So I'd lost all the hair down there, and sure enough, after taking the product, that the hair grew back, the itching stopped. And there were some other things as well that were
Wow.
just basic living things, like not being as hot in the summer out in a sport coat coming from a meeting back in the day when people went to meetings and wore those kind of clothes. But anyway, you're walking down the street and there's people a fraction your age fanning themselves, and you got a sport coat on figuring, hey, this is really cool because I'm feeling cool, because thermostat or temperature is one of the things that CBD works on. So you know to me it's a little bit like, you drink lots of water, it's good for you, and you get the right CBD in you and get your endocannabinoid system working properly, that's good for you too. And that's sort of in the space that kind of operate personally. And then I've been really excited by some of the things we saw with Path of Purity, with a lot of different folks, a lot of different things. But I had seen you do brain mapping with some other things before and was just fascinated by it, and went out of my way hoping that you would do the brain mapping and we'd let the data land where it landed. And we weren't surprised it landed where it landed, but we were really gratified it did. And again, thank you for doing that for us, because, when you're trying to choose a product out there and there's a whole lot of them, especially, we work through practitioners primarily, and, doctors and practitioners are looking for data and science that says, yeah, I want to trust the care of my patients to this product, or feel comfortable sending that over to my patient or client. So we loved having that data, and we'd already done the bioavailability report that was, again, also very, very positive. So we've kind of landed in the space of, here's the data, here's the science. We'll stand behind that and let you make your own decision, kind of. And that's again, the brain mapping is a huge piece of that for us. And again,
Yeah, you're welcome. So why don't you take a moment and just show our listeners your website and how they can learn more about everything we spoke about today, the background of cannabinoids, and as a practitioner watching this, how you actually have a program for practitioners as well.
this is our Path of Purity site. It's www.pathofpurity.com. You'll see at the top there's a patient portal and a practitioner portal. So I will click on that right now. It's going to take me into the back office. And we're quite proud of what we've actually done in terms of information that we make available both to patients and to practitioners who work with us. So one of the things that we have, and this is the back office version of this is the endocannabinoid system, explained in a little bit of detail. There's a patient version of this on our main site. This is one we actually moved to the back office as a resource material, if you will, for doctors and practitioners who work with us. But it gives you kind of an explanation of the endocannabinoid system. But then we got down into some research that I think a number of the doctors who are listening to this today or seeing this would be very interested in. And it's actually a study that was done in 2006 called The Endocannabinoid System as an Emerging Target of Pharmacotherapy. And it talked in that about the promise or potential of the endocannabinoid system to have an impact on a whole lot of different conditions and topics. I use the word topics because we're not allowed to talk about conditions and issues or illnesses and things. But this is the actual list that was referenced in that study. And of course, you can access the study right from our site. So that's actually part of our back office for practitioners to go in and read. And then we have what we call Hemp 101. And this will bring us over into a discussion of, some of the things you asked or talked about, the difference between isolate and full spectrum. So anyway, this gets into explaining the exogenous external key to our endogenous internal ECS and some of the things that we chatted about. And then this gets down and we'll actually talk about some of the research studies on the difference between isolate and full spectrum. And this down at the end is a chart that talks about the potential or suggested benefits of some of the other cannabinoids and things that are found in full spectrum. So, again, this is here as a reference point. And then what we actually did is we created what we call a CBD research page. And this is actually a link to the NIH library of all the topics that were in that study from 2006. And so this is actually a study of, for example, cannabidiol and pain. If you click there, it's going to come up with 722 different studies that are actually on the NIH library for people to go in there and review, see if there's things in there that speak to them or speak to the needs of a patient. We haven't done anything to draw conclusions from this. The biggest conclusion in there is that you would start to see, for example, there's 722 results or studies that have been done for cannabidiol and pain. If you go down and did one for inflammation, you'd probably find, I think it's somewhere in the 400s. Yeah, it's exactly 400. But this is a reference library or just fingertip access that a doctor or therapist can go in and kind of check on. And even for if you took nothing away from it except to kind of know that if there's 722 studies about pain, that's probably an indication that it's being used over in that area. And the same applies, to a whole host of other ones that are on this list. We went down and actually added some of our own. We actually added COVID-19 immune system and, of course, endocannabinoid system. These were ones that we added kind of after the fact. So again, this is their, immediate access to anybody working with us to simply go in and be able to access that information. If you come out to, the actual main site, which is up here, you can see the actual drop downs that somebody who's not working with us directly would go in and be able to see. One of the things, of course, that we have in here that we are just thrilled about is, of course, your brain mapping study. And so we put that over in an area of brain mapping. Our COAs are over there as well, the certificates of analysis. And of course, the study that was in there that you referenced about the bioavailability. So this information is there ready for, the public can actually see these, because we wanted the public to get an insight into the same things that we learned.
Well, I certainly appreciate how much detail you go into on your website, and how your website is actually used as a resource page for most of our docs and our patients to be able to go in and dig deeper if that's what they want. Most companies, it's all about the hype of a product, and they're not trying to educate, not trying to help people fully understand, the power of the product. And so I think this is a very important tool that you've created to give people that insight and that confidence that, hey, it's not just a fad thing or a hype thing. There is a ton of research that backs all of this. And more people are getting on board and trying one of these products. So I appreciate all that you've done, even before you've met me. I've just kind of came along the way and helped you validate what you already had going on, which is an amazing product. And we try to just create these platforms like this podcast to be able to let people have information that they just might not hear from their primary doctor or from mainstream media. It's a remarkable product that you actually have, and we've been enjoying it now with our patients for about 1.5 years, I believe. So, I appreciate you being on the show. Definitely have to have you back again for another episode to go a little bit deeper into all the new things that we're finding with this amazing time release product. So, is there any closing things you'd like to share with everybody?
If I may, please. So any doctor that's watching this who wants to work with us or is even curious, okay? There is no cost whatsoever to join. There is no annual dues or fees. And if you work with us, there is no monthly PV to be concerned about. It's basically what we have done, and I'll just give you kind of an overview of the pricing on it. A 60 tablet, 3,000 milligram bottle of Pathopurity sells for $150. And then there's a shipping per order cost on that. So if somebody orders 1 or 3, there's a fee for getting the product out to them. For most people, that is actually a 2-month supply. We reveal kind of the business side of this to people who are members with us. But let's just say we set out to work with practitioners. That's our primary way of working with people. We wanted to make it easy, and that's why it's, no cost, no obligation, et cetera, and no PVs. Essentially, if you want to register with us, you simply click on this practitioner portal.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, James. It's always a pleasure to have these conversations with you. And I am so excited to finally launch our CBD series on the Good News Doctor, because we've been talking about it for about 1 year. And now is the time for people to actually get the information and then do something with this information. Don't just learn about it and then let it be something in the back of your brain. Take action today. Click the link below and try this amazing CBD product. And I'm sure your lives will be transformed, such as mine. So until next time, you guys all have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye now.